right. Good afternoon. Unless I'm mistaken, today is Wednesday, which is means that it's all downhill from here, and that's a good thing. You've been asking us a number of times about the Secretary General's position on the current tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I can tell you today that Mr. Guterres spoke separately with President Aliyev of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia. He placed those calls this morning. In both telephone conversations, the Secretary General expressed his ongoing concern over the hostilities that have been reported along the Armenia-Azerbaijan international border, as well as the prevailing tensions. The Secretary General reiterated his call for immediate and full de-escalation, refraining from provocative rhetoric, and a return to negotiations. To that end, the Secretary General repeated our full support for the important efforts of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs and his expectations that both leaders will continue to work towards a peaceful resolution of the long-standing conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. And this morning, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, spoke by video message at the event entitled Recover Better, Economic and Social Challenges and Opportunities, which is a compilation of essays issued by the UN High-Level Advisory Board on Economic and Social Affairs. Ms. Mohammed said that we need all hands on deck if we are to rebuild our economy sustainably and inclusively. She added that the policy ideas in this compilation point the way. These approaches, she said, echo the Secretary General's own call for shared responsibility and global solidarity in responding to the socioeconomic impact of the pandemic. She also reiterated that the 2030 Agenda remains our agreed framework for recovering in ways that accelerate progress in climate change, poverty, and gender equality, while also addressing the inequalities and fragilities that have been exposed or exacerbated by the pandemic. Turning to Yemen, a new report warns that economic shocks, conflict, floods, desert locusts, and now COVID-19 are creating a perfect storm that could see Yemen return to alarming levels of food insecurity. The latest integrated food security phase classification analysis was released today by the Food and Agricultural Organization, the UN Children's Fund, and the World Food Program, and a number of their partners. It cautions that the number of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity could increase from 2 million to 3.2 million in the next 6 months. This would be an increase from over 25% of the population suffering from high levels of acute food insecurity to 40%. The humanitarian coordinator for Yemen, Lise Grande, said that when Yemen faced similar situations 18 months ago, there was a generous funding and famine was prevented. She cautioned that they won't be able to do the same this time unless the necessary funding is received now. And staying on Yemen, our colleagues at the International Organization for Migration say that so far this year, more than 100,000 people in Yemen have been forced to flee their homes. More on this on IOM's website. And moving on to Kenya, our humanitarian colleagues indicate that since the first case of the virus was confirmed on March 15th, the pandemic has rapidly spread. There have now been more than 13,000 cases and more than 200 deaths in Kenya. We and our humanitarian partners are supporting the government's response, including contact tracing, case management, community mobilization, and health promotion. Hundreds of sets of personal protective equipment to support healthcare workers have been distributed, and we've also provided infection prevention and control materials to nearly 600 health facilities. The UN has given 80,000 children with learning materials and nearly 25,000 children with soap, hand sanitizers, and other items. Some 9,000 households have received life-saving food assistance for a 2-month period, while more than 1,100 households have received cash transfer. The UN and the humanitarian community launched an emergency appeal for Kenya as part of the COVID-19 Global Humanitarian Response Plan, seeking nearly $260 million. And in neighboring Somalia, where there have been more than 3,100 reported cases with 93 deaths due to the virus, Adama Abdelmullah is coordinating the UN's health, humanitarian, and socioeconomic response to the pandemic with government and our partners. He's also working with the Secretary General Special Representative, James Swan, the World Health Organization, the UN Development Program, the World Food Program, and the UN Support Office for Somalia. They've all helped boost testing capacity and supported health centers, hospitals, isolation centers in several areas. For its part, the UN Children's Fund trained more than 750 healthcare professionals and have supported distance learning for more than 116,000 children. In addition to the COVID-19 response, the UN Assistance Mission in Somalia is urging a spirit of constructive compromise at a meeting between President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed and Farmajo and all of the leaders of Somalia's federal member states. They're expected to have important discussions on national priorities, especially elections. And turning to Mali, where our humanitarian colleagues warn us that there is a high risk of the virus spreading in the country as the healthcare system has been weakened by conflict and insecurity. The country has 2,475 confirmed cases of COVID, with 121 reported deaths. We, along with our humanitarian partners, are supporting the government-led response efforts by scaling up testing, strengthening awareness-raising activities, and providing medical supplies, as well as protective personal equipment for medical staff. Approximately 1.5 million people have been reached with information on virus prevention, and nearly 300,000 people received essential hygiene kits and water and sanitation services. More than 1,100 healthcare workers have been trained in infection prevention. In addition, the UN peacekeeping mission present in Mali tells us that they are implementing a citizen mobilization zero coronavirus in Mali project in Bamako and several other regions in collaboration with partners. The project aims to support the fight against COVID-19 by involving civil society organizations to raise awareness, reaching more than 6,000 beneficiaries. And a new research brief published today by the UN Children's Fund warns that at least 40 million children worldwide have missed out on early childhood education in their critical preschool years. COVID-19 shuttered childcare and early education facilities. The report notes that lockdowns have left many parents struggling to balance childcare and paid employment. A disproportionate burden was placed on women who, on average, spend more than 3 times longer on care and housework than men. You can find more on this report on UNICEF's website. And today, the UN Development Program, the World Health Organization, UNAIDS, and the O'Neill Institute for National and Global Health Law at Georgetown University launched a COVID-19 Law Lab initiative. The joint project gathers and shares legal documents from over 190 countries across the world to help states establish and implement strong legal frameworks to manage the pandemic. The goal is also to ensure that laws protect the health and well-being of individuals and communities, and that they follow international human rights standards. More information online at covidlawlab.org. And speaking of UNDP, tomorrow I will be joined by Achim Steiner, the UNDP administrator, and George Gray Molina, the author of the forthcoming report entitled Temporary Basic Income, Protecting Poor and Vulnerable People in Developing Countries. They will be here to talk about the report. All right, I think that's it from me. Let's see who has any questions, and bear with me for 2 seconds as I get set up here. Okay, let's go to the chat. Sorry. Okay, James Bays, go ahead.
Thanks, Steph. Let me start. I've got a couple of questions, but if I could start with a reaction to one of the things that you read out, which is Armenia-Azerbaijan. 2 questions, follow-ups related to that. Clearly, the SG supports the OSCE's operations, but given that there are clashes being taking place for some time, that clearly, as they're between countries, is a threat to international peace and security. Does the Secretary-General believe it's time for the Security Council to get involved? And the second part of this, on this issue, it seems drones seem to be one of the main weapons that are being used there at the moment. How concerned is the Secretary-General of the use of drones in small conflicts like this?
On your second question, I think the Secretary General has made it clear of his concern about the use of these kinds of technologies. We've seen drones being used in Libya, in other places, including in the Yemen conflict. These advanced in armaments are worrying and are of concern. On your first question, right now, I think it is the OSCE is in the lead, and all efforts should be made to support the OSCE Minsk co-chairs. The Secretary-General's position is that it needs to be followed. He's always been a believer in the important role that regional security organizations play in regional conflicts. We see, and I have to say it's on the difference, but we see different sub-regional organizations in Africa play an important role in various conflicts, as well as the African Union. And he believes right now the OSCE is in the lead and should be supported. And that was his clear message to both leaders.
I have two other questions on two other subjects. One is the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, and clearly claims of spying taking place, and yet the consulate has been closed down. How closely is the Secretary General monitoring this, considering there are two P5 players involved? And does he believe it's a breach of the Vienna Convention?
I'm not going to venture into legal opinions on the Vienna Convention. This is a bilateral matter to be dealt with between China and the United States. On a broader issue, I think you've heard the Secretary General speak about the risk of a growing gap between these two important members of the international community.
Finally, from me on Libya, reports that Russia and Turkey are contemplating the idea of some sort of joint commission on how to proceed in Libya, perhaps echoing the way they've been working in Syria. Is that something to be welcomed?
I think before we opine on that, I think we need to get a bit more details about what exactly that entails. Maria Krenova and then Iftikhar.
Hi, Steph. I like how you always pronounce my last name, a bit incorrectly, but on a French manner. Yeah.
Anything pronounced in a French manner is nice.
I totally agree. Yeah. There was an information today that Russian journalists were a team of Russian TV channel One was attacked in Portland by police during the protests. One of the women journalists was pushed and the cameraman was broken. So Russian Foreign Ministry already called for reaction from international organizations, and that's why I'm asking you if you have any reaction.
I don't have the details of the incident, but what is clear is that journalists everywhere need to be able to do their work free of any harassment, whether it is from law enforcement or from protesters. And any case of journalists being harassed or beaten, wherever it occurs, needs to be fully investigated. All right, Iftikhar and then Richard Roth. Iftikhar, I can't hear you. If somebody could liberate Iftikhar's microphone.
Yeah.
I see you and I hear you.
Thanks, Steph. Following up on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, while the Secretary General urged the two leaders to hold dialogue or to negotiate the resolution of the conflict, did he offer his good offices to them?
I mean, you know my stock answer to that, Iftikhar, is that as a matter of principle, the Secretary General's good officers are always available should all those involved in a dispute want it. But that's not the point. The point is that right now we have a regional organization, the OSCE, the Minsk co-chairs, and we're in the lead on trying to solve this long-running conflict, this long-running dispute. And it is important, the message to Secretary General, to both the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia was that we support this process and they should continue to engage with it.
Thank you.
No problem. Richard Roth. I cannot hear you, Richard.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes.
All right.
Miracle. Is that a beard you're sporting? You're breaking up, Richard. I can't hear. Try it again.
For the summer.
Okay, go ahead.
An overall question or two. I have a follow-up. How has the COVID UN New York City lockdown, do you think, affected diplomacy? And as a spokesman, what are you missing, if anything, most from not being at the office in terms of your job?
A couple of things. One, despite the lockdown, despite that we're all working from home, the business of the UN has continued full throttle. We continue to support our humanitarian operations. We continue to support our peacekeeping operations, our development projects. I mean, the Secretary General is very much out there with the policy briefs we put out on a regular basis. So the UN may be physically closed, but it remains open for business. We also continuing to support in whatever way we can the member states in their holding of meetings, whether they be physical, like the Security Council had recently, or online. So we are coping, and we are like every organization, every business, whether it's a private business or a public organization, we're coping as best we can. And I think, frankly, we're working full throttle despite the lockdown. What has changed for diplomats? I think you'd have to ask them the question of how much they've lost in terms of informal conversations. As for me personally, I of course miss seeing all of you and you dropping into my office to complain or ask questions and sometimes say thank you. I do miss that. And I think for me, the challenge is really getting the informal information that I need to do my job, which is harder to get. I remain in constant touch with the Secretary General, so that's not the issue, but it's the informal pollination of information that goes on in the corridors of the UN, I think, that we miss.
And as I said, a brief follow-up, the Secretary General loves to travel. They all do. Are there examples of how his diplomatic efforts have been hampered? Like many working from home executives, does he now see that more can be accomplished from the kitchen table than first-class travel for one night in and out of a city?
I think, for the Secretary General, I'm not sure he misses attending summits and conferences, though obviously a lot of important business is done during those meetings and the side conversations that he has, the more informal conversations that he has. I think what he misses is being out in the field. What he misses is seeing what the UN is able to deliver in the field, in development, in humanitarian, and the work that we do. He gathers an enormous amount of energy and strength, in a sense, from speaking to beneficiaries of the UN's work, asking them questions about how we can do better. And he also misses meeting the frontline humanitarian workers, the frontline peacekeepers, who throughout this pandemic have continued to do their job. Dulcie.
Yeah, so the reference to the Nagorno-Karabakh recent violence, who instigated it? Which side?
I'm not. We have no observers, and we are not formally mandated to report on that. We do know there's been conflict, there's been exchange of fire, there's been loss of life, which is extremely worrying, and that's why the Secretary General made these calls to push the leaders for de-escalation and to re-engage with the process.
So you don't know which side provoked it first?
I'm not. It's not for me to speak on this at this point.
Well, I don't know. You're the UN. You would know this.
There's some places where we have a mandate, Dulcie, where we have observers, where we have a reporting mandate. I can tell you right now, our focus is on supporting the OSCE and the Minsk co-chairs, and ensuring that there is de-escalation, that there is no more loss of life.
So if the Secretary General is not traveling, he's making phone calls to leaders?
Yes, I just reported that.
Right, but you only report that like once every week. The last time was a reference to calls he made to Libyan leaders. So this is the second one in at least a week. So does that mean he's just only making one call a week?
No, he's not making.
There are no official readouts of these calls.
One call a week. They'll see there are some calls which are important and part of also of public diplomacy and ensuring that there's a public message as well as a private message. He is also engaging in more discreet diplomacy and speaking to other leaders, speaking quite a bit to permanent representatives here. He has meetings with them. He's meeting with the Security Council president for the next month, I think either today or tomorrow. He's been actually extremely busy, and as always, some of it is public diplomacy and some of it is discreet diplomacy.
Yeah, but I mean, this is the first I've heard of any of these meetings. I mean, why isn't any of this information public?
Whenever we are able to make phone calls public, we do so. And in other times, in order to achieve the goal, it needs to be some discreet diplomacy, and that's what we do.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, Iftikhar, one more question, and then David Weiner.
Steph, amid reports of torrential monsoon rains and floods in Bangladesh, we have not had any update on the condition of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh.
It's a very good question. We'll ask our colleagues at UNHCR and at OCHA to give us an update for tomorrow. But they're obviously an extremely vulnerable population by the very nature of where they are housed.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. David?
Hi, Steph. How concerned is the Secretary General about escalating tensions between China and the U.S., and specifically U.S. decision to shutter the Houston consulate, China's vow to retaliate, and what ideas does the Secretary General have to de-escalate tensions?
A lot of these are bilateral issues that need to be dealt with. I think the Secretary General has expressed his concern about the decoupling and the growing tensions between these two major powers. Both of them are permanent members of the Security Council. And obviously, I think as we've said before, what happens in the outside world, the bilateral relationships amongst the P5 and some of the bigger powers has a direct impact on the ability of the UN and of its legislative bodies to speak unanimously. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. 2 days ago, the Israeli authorities dismantled a COVID-19 clinic in the city of Hebron. A few days earlier, they also dismantled another COVID-19 clinic in the city of Jenin. In March, they destroyed another COVID-19 clinic in the Jordan Valley, and also another one in the city of Silwan, next to Jerusalem. Mr. Mladinov praised the cooperation between Israel and the PA in the field of combating COVID-19, but he failed to mention the dismantling of these self-made, voluntarily COVID-19 clinics. Can you verify that?
I haven't seen those reports, but I will check.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn, yes.
Hello, Steph. Have you been in touch with the New York mayor recently? He's bracing for Donald Trump to send some stormtroopers into New York, has court cases planned and everything else, as was the case in Portland. Have you had any notification of this, or?
That is not, we are in touch with the city on a number of issues. That is not an issue in which we have a dialogue with or need to have a dialogue with the city.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all, and we shall see you tomorrow.